No, you're fine, Kane. You're not in. As long as you stay where you are.
Am I in it?
Obviously.
Well, you're not in. I can't. How the devil am I meant to do that?
Get that to film.
Put 0.5.
Yeah, do you want to do like two cameras?
No, I think you meant me holding 5.
Are you staying there, Sean?
No, I'll be moving short.
I didn't want to put you further on the internet. Obviously, I'm sure we've all watched your hour-long thing about Friedrich Engels. It is absolute.
That tomorrow.
What you got in the package?
Well, that's the tube which contained my speech.
Ah, right. So it's a long speech then.
7 pages, 10 minutes. How
I
many pages have you got?
Pollyanna, you want to go
3.
first?
Yeah, I'd love to.
I think we'll have Team ALCIBIADES first, and then we'll have the argument against it.
Okay.
Are you on the wrong side?
No.
Are we good to the funk, Pollyanna?
I can, yeah.
Time-honoured
I
tradition.
can.
Do you mind going over the rings?
Yes. Okay. So this is primarily Plutarch and Thucydides, just so we're all clear. So, the Greeks yearn for Alcibiades, but at the same time they hate him. In the end, though, they need him. These are the words of Aristophanes from his 405 BC comedy, Rocks. This quote summarizes the character of Alcibiades. He's strategic and charismatic, beautiful and somewhat treacherous. He's a chameleon. Most of all, though, he's a Greek hero. I would like to begin by addressing his penchant for pleasure and hedonism, and the role which is played in his numerous public scandals. Plutarch argues he was very much in the public eye, and his enthusiasm for horse breeding and other extravagances went beyond what his fortune could supply. Alcibiades' early aristocratic upbringing is emblematic of an ambitious leader, and clearly shows his desire to exceed the norm. This ambition arises time and time again, such as with the 415 Sicilian invasion, wherein we see Alcibiades promoting massive expansion in the name of Athenian supremacy. Alcibiades likely believed that his expedition would be easy. What reason would he have to doubt this, considering his prior victories? Such a victory occurred in September 432 BC at the Battle of Potidæa, when Alcibiades was awarded the highest honour of bravery at only the age of 18. May I add that this was the first time that our hero was drafted. Alcibiades was also awarded the position of general for the first time in 420, following his efforts in bringing the Argives, Mantineans, and Eleans into an alliance with Athens. Anyhow, Alcibiades believed that this Sicilian expedition would supply Athens with a bounty of wealth and timber, which could then surely be used to restore Athens. Nicias, ever as idealistic as Cato, acting as though he were living in Plato's Republic, advocated against this. Instead, suggesting that Athens should forego the expedition altogether. Nicias later changed his strategy, instead advocating for excess, in the hope that his ridiculous demands would be refused. However, when the expedition was not cancelled, but instead supplemented, he turned once again to a far more sinister strategy. In early June 415, the Athenian people awoke to find the Hermes statues disfigured in a betrayal of blatant sacrilege. When the Corinthians were amongst those blamed for this crime, the Athenian people later settled on Alcibiades, a known party animal and atheist. Well, I would like to disprove these rumours conclusively. Why would Alcibiades want to jeopardise the very Sicilian expedition, which he so vehemently fought for, especially considering the risks of mutilating the statues, which would include the utter destruction of his political career? Nicias, however, did not want this expedition, and following public disagreements with Alcibiades, would have every desire to implicate his political adversary in a scandal. Furthermore, 2 of Nicias' brothers were later implicated for their roles in the destruction of the Hermes statues. Is this not apparent enough evidence for his role in the crime? I would like to draw your attention to the political climate within Greece at the time. Sparta and Athens alike despised powerful leaders, a fact we see realised through individuals like Brasidas, who faced scrutiny from Spartan chiefmen for his success. Surely then, Alcibiades would want to present himself as harmless, and what better way to do this than by presenting himself as a hedonistic party animal? It is very likely that Alcibiades was aware of Nicias' plot, and the wider conspiracy amongst Nicias' followers to do away with Alcibiades. After all, He was so certain of his innocence in the matter that it was Alcibiades himself who advocated that the expedition be paused so he can be sent to court. While some of you may interpret this as Alcibiades expressing his innocence, others may interpret this as a means of survival. This is because shortly after his departure to Sicily, we can see the beginnings of an anti-Alcibiades plot within Athens. Perhaps if Alcibiades had been allowed to stay, the rumours may have been disproven, and he would not have been put onto death row. Now, Alcibiades' choice in fleeing from Athens may be interpreted as fundamentally unheroic. However, Alcibiades himself argues, "I wouldn't even trust my own mother when it comes to the matter of my life or death." I would encourage you to reflect upon what you would do if your life was held in the hands of your sworn enemy. Is it cowardice or wisdom to run away? I would argue that fear for one's own life should not be mistaken for villainy. Upon his arrival in Sparta, Alcibiades remarks, "The Spartans are no longer my enemies, but Athens has fallen into the hands of evildoers, and hence she is Athens no more." There is something fundamentally Caesar-esque about Alcibiades' departure from Athens. However, his quick escape seems far more preferable to Caesar's slow death. My opponent will argue that Alcibiades' decision to join Sparta is indicative of a villain. I will reply with Alcibiades' own words, "I do not think I'm attacking a homeland that belongs to me. Rather, I'm doing all I can to reclaim a homeland that I no longer have." We later see Alcibiades reclaiming his homeland once again when he was recalled in 407 BC, after having established key Athenian strongholds, recaptured key locations, and restored Athenian democracy in spring 410. Thucydides himself remarks about the 411 Samian crisis. "It was one of the most brilliant suggestions of the entire war. No other man but Alcibiades could have convinced the Athenians at Samos to stay put." These victories culminated in Alcibiades receiving this title of Strategos Autocrata in 407 BC. Despite Alcibiades' departure from Athens, his return suggests that he really loved his homeland and was merely chased out by envious political opponents. His last departure was in 406 BC, when, due to the recklessness of Antiochus, the Battle of Naucus was lost, despite Alcibiades' strict orders for a subordinate. Despite his multiple Athenian victories, he was once again stripped of his command and unfairly exiled. Other complaints may regard his affair with the Spartan king Agis' wife. This affair was not only beneficial for Agis, as it supplied him with a son, but it was also entirely excusable. In Spartan culture, wives were often shared. Furthermore, Spartan women had far more agency than Athenian women, and were often encouraged to insult Spartan men, and what better way to insult a Spartan husband than by sleeping with an Athenian man? I may also add, it takes two to tango. Yet again, this conspiracy resulted in Alcibiades receiving an unfair death penalty. I would argue that Agis' true insult did not come with the infidelity, but rather with the impressive victories of Alcibiades, which juxtaposed his own meagre accomplishments. Yet again, I would cite envy as the cause of upset. That was it.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Very good.
So we're arguing against Alcibiades because he was ultimately bad ruler. So today, Finley and I will be arguing that Alcibiades is ultimately a bad leader because his ambition consistently outweighed his loyalty, his decisions damaged Athens, and his leadership created instability rather than unity.
Yeah.
At first glance, Alcibiades appears impressive. Yes, he was intelligent, charismatic, wealthy, and a gifted speaker. Even Thucydides acknowledges that in a public capacity, his conduct of the war was excellent. However, Thucydides also noted that Alcibiades' way of life made him objectionable, and this criticism cannot simply be dismissed as irrelevant morality. A truly effective leader must provide stability, loyalty, and long-term security for the state they govern, qualities Alcibiades consistently failed to demonstrate.
Yeah.
Supporters of Alcibiades often argue that leadership should be judged purely by results, the ability to secure victories, maintain power, and achieve political goals regardless of the methods used. They point to his military success, diplomatic skill, Olympic prestige, and remarkable ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Yet this ability was not a strength of principled leadership. It was opportunism. Alcibiades repeatedly changed sides during the Peloponnesian War, serving Athens, then Sparta, then Persia, before returning again to Athens whenever it suited his personal ambition. A leader who abandons his own city in times of crisis cannot truly be considered loyal or trustworthy. Furthermore, Alcibiades' ambition directly harmed Athens. He strongly supported the Sicilian expedition of 415 BC, persuading the Athenians to invade Sicily with the promise of wealth, power, and easy victory. However, this campaign became one of the greatest disasters in Athenian history, costing thousands of lives, enormous financial losses, and weakening Athens permanently.
Yeah.
Rather than accepting responsibility, Alcibiades fled after accusations of sacrilege, abandoning the very expedition he had encouraged. This demonstrates recklessness and self-interest rather than genuine leadership. In all but name, he was into aggrandizement. In addition, Alcibiades created political chaos whenever and wherever he went. His account... I read the wrong line. His consistent shifting of alliances caused distrust among both allies and enemies, while many Athenians feared his arrogance and believed he aimed at tyranny. Although he possessed charisma and brilliance, these talents were ultimately used to advance himself rather than protect Athens. Adaptability without principle becomes manipulation, and intelligence without loyalty becomes dangerous.
Here.
Although Alcibiades was undoubtedly talented and displayed charisma and military skill, those alone do not make someone a good leader. His selfish ambition, betrayal of allies, reckless decision-making, and pursuit of personal glory weakened Athens during one of the most critical moments in its history. Therefore, Alcibiades should not be remembered as the greatest leader of his age, but as a dangerously ambitious figure whose brilliance was undermined by selfishness, instability, and betrayal.
Here.
Very well argued. Brilliant.
Shall we have Colbett's opening speech?
You've got something to
I
say.
don't have a speech, Sean, as always. But I don't think Alcibiades was that bad. I think he's misunderstood, and I think he's written in you have to think about the historian bias towards Alcibiades.
What? Sorry, Thucydides operated on the fact that if he wanted his histories to be used centuries later, therefore he was very objective in his writing.
Brennan, do you want to deliver your
Well,
oration?
do we mind? Do we mind?
Let's
I
do it.
want to hear it.
Shall we? Right. It's a very, very good speech, Colbeck. I don't know who wrote it for you, but it was very good.
Xenophon was our main historian for the end of the war, which was when Alcibiades was mostly involved in.
Well, let's not get bogged down, shall we? Will you give me leave to begin? Righto, ladies and gentlemen, honoured guests, friends, it is sad the number of ends that approach us. We've had the end of our clubs, the end of open evenings, the end of our various subjects, and before the ultimate end of our college career, we have the last of our, I hope, beloved ancient history debates. But it is with all the frankness and all the passion which I can put into words that I say that if you come away from this room today thinking anything but ill of Alcibiades, son of Cleinias, then it is the end of common sense as well. Oh friends, I am but a poor orator, as you all do know, for my career is a litany of eminent but noble failures, for I have failed to convince you of the good of Sparta, of the good of Athens over Sparta, of Greece over Rome, of republic over empire, of Cicero over Caesar, and many more matters both trivial and great. But surely, if I should fail today in making you loathe, as I do, a man whose own track record is the betrayal of his first country, his home and people, the betrayal of his own soldiers and expedition, the betrayal of his second country and its king, the betrayal of his homeland yet again, the betrayal of his third country, its governors and kings, and one last betrayal of Athens, her soldiers and citizens and their trust, then I am not fit to be an orator, or you betray your ears. What honour can you truly believe belongs to a man who had not even decency, a man who would not stand for anything? When we examine the figures of the past, is our aim not to revere the noble, that their example may be followed, and to discredit the ignoble, that theirs may be used to caution against iniquity? Is the basis of this, therefore, not to examine the men and women of history based on their actions and their values? What values could my opposition hope to ascribe to a man who couldn't be trusted to not switch sides during a game of noughts and crosses? And consequently, what actions reflect his true beliefs? None of them, because his beliefs, by nature of his own dilatory flip-flopping, remain a mystery to us. It is likely that he never had any beliefs, and if he did, he was hopelessly inobedient of them. I do not say that Alcibiades never did a noble thing, nor do I say that all the accusations against him were entirely true, but what I do say is that the very nature of his chameleonic character, as my honourable friend expressed in her speech, is the vice which permeates all of his others. His lack of principles, his shunning of anything worth believing in, his total disregard for good, is what makes his character one of a very rare sort of miserable. For indeed, it is true that he was endowed with prowess on the battlefield, I would agree, but what good is generalship if you have nothing worth fighting for? And indeed, it is true that he was gifted with good looks, but what value is fair hair or complexion when it only masks a hollow soul devoid of conviction? Yes, indeed, it is true that he was beloved of the multitude, but what good is popularity if one is not going to use it for anything worth using? Alcibiades is the very epitome of the protoplasmic invertebrate jelly. For it is as Aristotle wrote in his Nicomachean Ethics, every rational activity aims at some end or good. Alcibiades had no aim, no end, and subsequently he is a moral wastrel, careening around the world of men only to wreak havoc and evil in his wake. Now that I've explained the root of his evil, I shall move on to expound on the specific cases of his evil. Perhaps I should have learned my lesson from our debate on Sparta, that you all love mindless violence, and that I shall only further endear Alcibiades to you by explaining his brutish hobbies. But I'm still sadly devoted to avoiding bloodshed. Alcibiades had a love of combat and dirty, ungentlemanly, underhanded tricks at that. He bit his wrestling opponents when he was losing. He beat his servants to death with clubs. He boxed the ears of his musical opponents, and he clouted teachers who didn't have copies of books he wanted. He did the same to eminent politicians and generals, just purely as a joke, as fancy took him, not for any good reason. He angered his wife by carrying on constant affairs with foreign trollops, and when she went into the city to file for divorce, what does he do? He goes in and he seizes her up by force and carries her home. And the whole city is just looking on, bemused, too afraid to intervene on her behalf. And, last but certainly not least, he has the tail cut off of his very handsome and much beloved dog for absolutely no reason that can be discerned. His friends, they say, Alcibiades, why on earth have you done this? This is a dreadful act. What does he do? He just laughs in their face and says, this is exactly what I wanted, because now all that people will talk about is that I cut the tail off my dog for no reason, and they won't think about all my other wicked and corrupt deeds. He is condemned out of his own mouth, ladies and gentlemen. His friends scolded him, yes. And this brings us on from Alcibiades the thug to Alcibiades the debaucherer. Though I perhaps also ought to have learned my lesson from our debate on Catiline that you all love debauchery as well. But alas, I'm too attached to these dusty old things called morals and ethics, so please forgive me, my most exalted audience, for my weird belief that bad men must be opposed and not revered. Friends and enemies of this cretin were victim alike to his wantonness. There was the time that he refused an invitation to dinner from one of his friends, only to go on his usual screaming bender, turn up at the same friend's house later on, and absolutely ransack his house of cutlery. And then, of course, there is he used he used civic valuables at his own table as if they were his. He swaggered around in a purple floor-length cloak. He carried a golden shield emblazoned with things that he had no right to have, awards of courage that he had not earned in the eyes of the city. But I sense that these trivial stories aren't really going to do much for you, so I refer to the crowning debauchery. That, as plague swept Athens, devastated her people, wore down her resolve, piled high the bodies of loved ones rotting in the fetid streets, what does our hero do? What is the action of brave, noble Alcibiades to save the city in her hour of utmost need? Why, he keeps up his partying, night and day, while the flower of Athens, while young, old, rich, poor, well-known, eminent, and unknown, and even his beloved adoptive father Pericles are cut down by the blade of an invisible foe. I implore you, friends, cast back your mind to a more recent example of coronavirus, when it besieged Britain, when the nation locked down, and when families were torn from one another, and many died without their families, yet the corridors of power reeked of booze, and the parties carried on unimpeded. Why are many so willing to forgive Alcibiades for a crime for which they will not pardon Boris Johnson? Ladies and gentlemen, this is hypocrisy manifest. But perhaps all of this you can forgive, and though I don't think it reflects well on you at all or befits you, perhaps a drunken, brawling hooligan is your idea of a paragon. Well, I move on then to this creature's petulant egotism as a way to garner your distaste. When peace had at last been made by Nicias, the man who truly deserves our applause today, and Greece put down their spears, a valuable opportunity to be given for reconciliation and for recuperation for both Sparta and Athens to belate the attrition. What does Alcibiades do? Well, it is the usual occupation of bad men to stir trouble and cause wars, and Alcibiades set to work immediately at provoking conflict anew. On the one hand was the usual demagogue's excuse, as with his poor dog, that cause war abroad to distract from corruption at home, but also with Alcibiades is the unique, childish ire that peace had been made, but in someone else's name. So he lied to a Spartan delegation, then he lied to the people of Athens, and then he tried to stir up war in Mantinea, failing in a battle, might I add, and then his worst crime. Mad with lust for glory, he corrupts the young men of Athens with false promises of fortune abroad, and he calls for a full-scale invasion of Sicily. There could have been no legitimate reason for such an expedition other than the price to be paid to sate this man's ego. And he who will pay for his ego in the blood of myriad of his own countrymen is the most wretched, the most vile, the most opprobrious, monstrous, effronterous, shameless beast on God's earth. And, not content to merely instigate this expedition, to rekindle the bloodiest war in the memory of the Greeks, and let the casualties fall where they may, after jumping ship to Sparta, he takes active measures to ensure that the Athenians are defeated, to allow the Spartans to best thrash those men who had followed him, who had admired him, who had trusted him. The slow, horrible, starving deaths of more than 50,000 Athenians in quarries in Syracuse or along the dirt tracks of Sicily, diseased and forgotten, are the responsibility of the man my opponent will have you admire. Who here is so base to agree with them? Who here is so heartless, so barbaric, so rude? Who here will throw away good and embrace evil, whose every facet is demonstrated in this man? Thucydides, Plutarch, Plato, Xenophon, these are the names which decorate my list of sources. I know the sources have been shared. I wasn't expecting, I thought it would just be Ollie, who doesn't cite his sources. But anyway, those have been sources. Anyway, but they share in my judgment. They share in my judgment that although he was talented, he was wicked. And he was a wicked man. Mark ye gods how it is true, and strike me down where I stand if I'm to be ignored again. Oh, friends, will you at last heed the call of reason? She is hoarse with shouting for your attention. Listen, listen, listen.
I think you saved your best till last there, Finley.
Did I? Oh, jolly good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Right, questions from the audience. Let's start with that. Any got any questions I'd like to put to either pro or anti Alcibiades team? Holly, you're not in the audience. Peter, got a question?
I thought very good speeches.
Cheers.
I thought you did. You vehemently proved he was a wicked man. On the traitor front, I think put me on the spot here, Sean.
Don't have to be a question.
What questions do people like normally ask?
Well, questions.
What are the FAQs?
Is it only clarification, or is it?
Well, or questions that will be a problem for each side.
Okay.
Like, for example, Finley, would you agree that Alcibiades was not guilty of vandalising the Hermit?
Yes, I think it's probably unlikely that he was responsible. I mean, I would say it's definitely more likely than Nicias, and I think it's a completely spurious claim to say Nicias was behind it or even remotely inculcated. Nicias was an absolutely pious man, and I'm sure that his piety will be thrown back at me by saying that he was incompetent to have let the lunar eclipse stand in the way of retreat and possibly would have saved the lives on Sicily. So you can't have it both ways. He was a pious man. He would not have defaced the Hermes. I don't think it's entirely certain that Alcibiades did deface the Hermes specifically. He was a bit of a drunken hooligan, and it's likely he would have done this thing, an avowed atheist as well. And so, when one's under the influence of alcohol, one doesn't necessarily consider the best interests of one's expedition. I'm sure he didn't necessarily consider his best interests in his affair with Timai in Sparta. So he's not always got his best interests at heart. But yes, as I said, there's no concrete evidence. What I will say, though, is that he deserved to be exiled from Athens, whether or not he had done that specific offence, and probably did. By the judgment of the time, obviously I'm not in favour of the death penalty, but by the judgment of the time, that would have been the punishment that was due to him, regardless of the Hermes or not.
So not guilty of the Hermit, but guilty of other offences.
Yes.
Yeah, Peter?
You very clearly outlined how you like to live a quite, I don't know, playboy style debauched.
is the word.
Debauched.
Bring up Sparta.
But was it, I think I remember Sean saying how when he was in Sparta, he lived quite a modest lifestyle. So could you say that that kind of criticism of him as a person may be a little bit over-exaggerated?
Yes, of course, go on, go on.
That's why he's referenced as a chameleon, because he's able to change his personality and his traits to accommodate those who he's around. So in the sense that we see him as somebody who trades sides consistently, Athens, Sparta, Persia and whatnot, it's all part of his ruse to basically gain the support and gain the trust of other people for his own personal gain. So the matter could be that he is truly debauched, but he knows when he needs to act politically and respectfully to appease his not opponents, but his the members of the next party that he's trying to gain favour of.
Nathan, got a question or a point?
Yeah.
I think it's just interesting how, Alcibiades seems like a bit of a glory hound. He's always hunting for his next source of glory, and it doesn't really matter who it's from. You just seek it out from anyone.
Ollie, what do you mean? Is Alcibiades a man with no principles?
I think Alcibiades does have principles. I think that, him being a chameleon, I wouldn't say it's a completely fair term. Flip-flopper maybe, but I think that his end goal was to completely stop all war intention between Sparta and Athens, and he would do that by any means necessary. The Sicilian expedition, though, that you keep bringing up as being one of the big, terrible events that he caused, I wouldn't blame him for that. He went to Sicily, one, to aid the allies that had asked Athens for help, and two, with the impression that he would be one of the 3 lead generals on that expedition, but he was recalled because of gross rumours made up by his political enemies, and so he had to go back to Athens for trial. I think if Alcibiades had stayed in Sicily, then that expedition would have gone very differently, as he would have been a more competent general, which he proved on his first mission out in battle at the age of 18.
Reply to that, Finlay?
If I may, he proved himself a valiant soldier, not necessarily a brilliant general. Mantinea is a clear example of Alcibiades' failures. A point I would make is he was most definitely responsible for the Sicilian expedition. That is the consensus of the sources, and he is clearly the one inciting this against opposition. Another point, you say that his ultimate goal was peace by starting war. Peace had been made in someone else's name, and that was what irked him. He did not have any principles. I challenge you to provide for me a single principle that this man stuck to throughout his existence. There isn't one. I thought of more, but I shall sit.
Okay.
Is coming back to the Sicilian expedition, I was just to kind of piggyback onto Willie's point. He obviously started the expedition thinking he would be one of the leading generals. When he was taken off, it was given to two leaders, Lamachus and Lysias. Lamachus would be killed, Lysias would be become very ill, and actually he would then send a message after the expedition was beginning to fail, saying, actually requesting abandonment of the entire thing. So could you say it was actually down to the leadership in Athens forcing a doomed expedition than a doomed expedition that wasn't going to be a success with Spartan support, rather than Alcibiades' fault?
That's good.
Well, to answer that question, I'm going to cite Thucydides. So Thucydides gives the most influential criticism of Alcibiades, and even though he admits that he's talented, he argues that personal ambition damaged Athens. So he says that his habits gave offence to everyone, and he suggests that Athens failed Alcibiades because he seemed too ambitious and self-indulgent. And he believed that Alcibiades cared more about increasing his own power and prestige and helping Athens. So in the case of the Sicilian expedition, Thucydides implies that Alcibiades pushed for the invasion party for personal glory, saying that he wanted to be personally appointed to command. Those are the direct words. And this supports the argument that the expedition was motivated by ego rather than good leadership.
Okay, Antoinette?
What would the people who say that Alcibiades is a hero or a good person say about when he went to Sparta and advised them to send somebody to the Sicilian expedition and then help them be defeated? What would you say about that?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that Alcibiades is a hero. He's a Greek hero. I wouldn't say he's an Athenian hero.
No.
That's not what the debate is. It's about whether he's a hero.
Well, I dare say the terms haven't been exactly defined.
True. But I would say that it was a matter of survival for him to have to travel to Sparta. He did say in his quote that he did love his homeland. He loved Athens, but Athens didn't love him. Athens kicked him out. Athens wanted to kill him. And so I think it was perfectly fair for him to feel a little bit of, I don't know, anger at that, because he'd been betrayed by his country, which he loved.
Good. Marty, got a question?
Yeah, so I would say, like, if he was a hero, like, so you say that, like, if he stayed in, like, if he went to Sparta because he would have been killed otherwise, but that's, like, quite a cowardly thing. Like, heroes shouldn't be scared of death. Like, he should have either died with principle or returned home to face trial. It's like, if we think some of the other heroes from this topic, so like Leonidas, he didn't even have to go, and he was a hero, and he died anyway. That didn't stop him. If he was truly a hero, he would have either stayed in Sicily, despite being recalled, or just gone home, no matter what.
Yeah.
Well, talking about Spartan heroes believed in Thanatos, which was peaceful death. But after all, Alcibiades wasn't a Spartan, he was an Athenian. That would be what my
Good reply. Finlay?
I feel like we're moving about what kind of a hero he is. He's a Greek hero, but then Greek values that aren't Athenian. You know, he doesn't have to conform to anything. And also, he fought for Persia. How can a Greek hero fight for Persia? These are the two diametrically opposed forces.
Would you suggest that a good leader remains loyal to their state, and he betrayed Athens multiple times? You mentioned before that he felt betrayed by Athens, but previously we learned that the Peace of Nicaea, we knew that Pericles would, if he were still alive, would have accepted it and would have ended any sort of conflict between the two.
Yeah.
Whereas Alcibiades completely went against that, contradicting the entire Alcimenidae family and what they stood for, morality, democracy, whatnot. He basically employed sort of dictatorial leadership, and he was able to transfer his loyalties. So, I mean, if that makes him a good hero, well then I think that we've got the definition of hero.
Yeah.
Next.
But yeah.
Can you say that towards the end he was truly loyal to Athens, though? Because one, he proved himself to be a distinguished general at that point, because Lysander refused to engage with him. But also, when he was essentially fired, he still attempted to give them advice, which is seen in Xenophon. But the generals completely and categorically rejected it, even though he had proven himself on the battlefield. Can you say that him trying to assist Athens in that final battle shows that he was still loyal to them?
Final battle came. Where's that?
On camera is crazy, you know. Aegis Potter.
Correct, well done. Yes, good. So Finlay, so how is it not fair to say that Alcibiades showed his true patriotism by turning up at Aegis Hospitality?
Yes, ambition and recklessness, exactly. I mean, you know, it is again the recurring theme of Alcibiades making himself absolutely insufferable, even to the commanders-in-chief. This is the quote, "We are the generals here, not you." I mean, can you imagine if a former general in this country were to go and start advising, you know, the War Office? It would be absolutely unthinkable. And so this is clearly just glory hunting on behalf of Alcibiades, and he threw his chips in with Athens at the end because Athens seemed to be doing the best. And that was, you know, there's no conclusive evidence of his patriotism because, as I say, we can't believe him because he is just a fundamental traitor.
Olivia, got a question?
I was just going to ask if Alcibiades hadn't been hungover, do you think he would have won against Lysander?
That's a good question.
Potentially, but then, you know, the implication that he was hungover automatically confirms our point that he was a complete debaucherer and was not fit to be in command. I mean, I'm going to sound like Hannah Spencer here, but realistically, if you're a general, you should not be drinking in between battles. That's not a good idea.
Team Alcibiades, how would you defend Alcibiades' conduct in that battle?
So which battle was
The
that?
one where he neglected his fleet to go to a party.
Okay. Which historian is this?
Xenophon.
Okay.
Battle of Notium.
It's also
Yeah, we were going to say that he put, was it Antiochus?
Yeah.
He put Antiochus in charge with very, very, very strict orders not to invade, and they did it anyway, so could you not blame it all on him instead?
Okay. Really?
Throughout the passage, we had argued that the fact that such a important battle was given to somebody of a lower rank suggests that Alcibiades prioritized self-interest rather than the stability of Greek union. And in this case, I think that the fact that he left somebody in charge would leave him to blame ultimately, because if he hadn't, then there would have been no defeat at Notium.
I don't think this is
Oh, yeah.
I would like to argue that the other side is talking about Alcibiades essentially taking a bunch of power and wanting to keep it to himself, but when he delegates, you criticize him. Why?
With him, he gave power to Antiochus with strict orders not to invade the enemy force. He told Antiochus to stay and keep the army at camp and to not engage. So the fact that Antiochus then himself got drunk after Alcibiades had left, that's the fault of Antiochus instead of Alcibiades.
I would like to say this is one of the weaker arguments on our side, and I concede that the Battle of Notium is not a good way of criminalising Alcibiades. But as I say, he was a skilled general. I admit that he did some very good battles and he won some very good victories. This is not one of them, admittedly, but I shan't criticise his conduct, is the point I would make. But what I would say is that this position of glory which he has achieved only by wading through the blood of his countrymen, who he sent to their doom in Sicily. And yes, you can say that it was the command in Athens that prolonged the expedition, but ultimately, why did they do that? Because they had been corrupted by ideas of empire, and who incited those ideas? That was Alcibiades. He is the root cause.
How Sicily would have turned out.
Well, I suppose he couldn't have known exactly how it would have turned out, but the fact of the matter is that the original stated aim of the expedition was on completely the other side of the island. So this is clearly not being carried out in the way that he portrayed it to be carried out. This is, this just proves that it is glory hunting.
Not only that, but I think that the fact that the three commanders for that battle, the fact that they disagreed on how to act on it, should have been a clear notice that this expedition would not have been as clear-cut as he had expected it to. When commanders of the same side can't agree, something is seriously wrong internally.
Okay. Isla, got a question?
Not really.
Oh yeah.
If he's a Greek hero, how can you excuse him advising Persia?
Here.
Shall I answer that for you, Pauline?
Yes, please.
Wasn't Persia a Spartan ally at that?
Mr. Speaker!
I would say Alcibiades made the Persians think he was helping them, but if you remember, his advice was to help Athens and Sparta, which I would say was a very clever way of actually helping his home city, because by saying that, he kept them in the war. So I would say that Alcibiades played the Persians. He made them think he was helping them, but actually he was helping his own city as a true patriot. Yeah, Pierre?
I've got one more for this side, if that's okay. Do you think it's a fair assessment to say that Alcibiades would only turn his back on his state if they turned their back on him first?
Not at all, no. Because we see that he made himself opprobrious in manner, right? Let us imagine that someone at your college just went around smacking people whenever they disagreed with them, got drunk and turned up, with harlots in the corridors. They would be expelled from York College, and no matter what they said afterwards about how much they loved York College, they made themselves opprobrious. It is their fault.
Oh yeah.
A lot of your sources, when you're talking about Alcibiades' like hedonistic behaviour, you spoke about his shield, which I believe is the one that has Eros on it, and so he's accused of atheism for that. And that comes from Plutarch.
Yes, well, it's definitely from Plutarch.
Plutarch, a known religious man. Obviously, Alcibiades was an atheist, so would Plutarch not want to, in some way, ruin the image of Alcibiades, knowing that he wasn't as religious as Plutarch would have wanted?
Well, potentially, but then, it's the case that everybody is biased, and why would he want to ruin his reputation? Because he believed it. No. Thucydides is just as biased as the next man, but it's a different kind of bias. I'm biased, you're biased, we're all biased. Bias is having a point of view. We don't exist as a god looking down on the earth. We are all interested in that we are all in the world, and we all have a specific view. That's bias, so yes, we're all biased. Apologies. The point is that Plutarch was a religious man. He believed in the religion of the time, and that is why he wanted to criticise Alcibiades. So yes, he had his vested interest, but it's not necessarily bias. Well, no, it is necessary. Forgive me, I've tied myself up in knots here, but you understand my point.
Yeah.
Is that that is why he despised him. He didn't, put those characteristics onto him in order to despise him. It comes afterwards.
Can I add on to that? Was Athens not built on religious virtue? Weren't all Athenians before him, like leaders and whatnot, weren't they respectful of the gods, and we saw how that turned out and whatnot? So the fact that he's an atheist, that would suggest that he had some sort of cynicism to him that was that employed him to lead Athens into such devastation. So I think Plutarch is fair in saying that, all pinpointing his atheism, because at the end of the day, if you lack respect for the gods, you lack respect for your hometown, you lack respect for the people, and you're genuinely interested in yourself, narcissism.
To combat against that, I would just additionally say that personally I believe that a lot of this could have been more attempts by Nicias and his crowd to try and defame Alcibiades, but I know that you won't agree with me. Sorry.
I'll come back to what you said.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Speaker.
No more illusions about neutrality for me. I would say, to Amelia's point, it's a good one, but the great defining feature of Athens is its philosophical diversity. Its tolerance of a range of views. So the fact that if Alcibiades was an atheist, that in itself reflects the great quality of Athens, that it can produce that sort of range of a thinker.
But does Thucydides say that made the people of Athens fear him?
And undoubtedly,
What good is a leader who's feared by his own people?
Yeah, but Alcibiades undoubtedly loved by these people as well.
But there's a source that directly quotes that he's feared by.
Oh yeah, well yes, but when Xenophon describes his return to Athens, that is a hero's return, undoubtedly.
If I may, yes, he was an atheist, but not all atheists in Athens at the time ended up as debaucherers. I mean, I forget exactly who it was, but there was a number of eminent atheists who just went about their lives as perfectly humble, ordinary, respectful people. It's the same as nowadays. I'm an agnostic. I'm not a firm believer in the Church of England, but I do believe, in right and wrong. I believe in my ethics. Just because you are an atheist does not mean you have to abandon right and wrong, and that is what he did. So this is not about atheism, this is just about a complete abandonment of good and bad, which is what Alcibiades did time and again, uncommitted to anything.
Okay, you got a question?
I wouldn't even know where to start.
Surely Aegis Potomac, okay?
Well, yeah, but I don't want to say that again because I'll get it wrong.
Okay. Andy, got a question?
No.
Ollie, want to come back?
Yeah, I had a lot in my head and now it's all gone. So
How typical.
Yeah, always. But it has actually all gone out my head.
Leon, got a question?
kind of already been.
Go on, mate.
To go back to the Notium thing, it's like you justified that by saying, oh, but he gave orders to Antiochus to not do it. It's like if I put a child in front of a marshmallow and leave the room, who's the fool if the child eats the marshmallow? Me left in there, or the kid who doesn't know any better? It's like if you leave a low-level general with a giant fleet right in front of an enemy, it's like you're a bit of a fool for leaving him there, aren't you? It's not exactly Antiochus' fault.
That was a test done by scientists in the 1950s, recreated in the early 2010s. And half the children ate marshmallow, half of them didn't eat the marshmallow, and I think that's just a bit irrelevant to compare.
Even 50-50.
A war general and another war general and an army to a child with a marshmallow.
I think we should stop talking about Notium. It's not an effective point.
With, it's gone out my head again, for God's sake, every time. Yes, right, with the peace treaty of Nicaea, I think it would be, like, you have to imagine it from Alcibiades' point of view. He has lived through several failed peace treaties by this point. You have to think that by this point, Alcibiades would have seen this peace treaty like, well, that's just not going to work, we're just going to go to war again, so we may as well just do it now. And
I beg your pardon.
And just get it out of the way. And after the war Alcibiades started, there wasn't another war between Athens and Sparta. So Alcibiades' tactic kind of worked.
What?
Yes, it was bloody. Yes, it was barbaric. But it stopped war between Sparta and Athens.
Because Sparta won, because Alcibiades.
It stopped war between Sparta and
No,
Athens.
it
stopped. So if Winston Churchill had stood up and lost to Hitler, there would have been no more war with Hitler. He would have won.
You're comparing Sparta to the Nazis.
It doesn't matter if I am. Yeah,
No mention of the Nazis.
And just remember, Athens was still a
Germany, mind.
After the war, after 20 years later, Sparta was completely crippled and wasn't even a powerful nation by the time of Philip. Athens still had some power.
Because the
and influence.
Spartans had the decency to not entirely eradicate the Athenians after the war when they'd won.
Exactly, so would you not say that it's actually kind of a good thing because there wasn't another war after?
No.
The Athenians got
No.
relatively
And how could
spared.
Alcibiades have known this? Do you think he was...
No, Alcibiades wouldn't have known this, but he made an educated risk on this peaceful fail will just both get more powerful
But
again. More people will die.
Can I just ask, we debated, we did a paper on the causes of the wars and whatnot after peace treaties, and you said that he lived through a bunch of peace treaties. I believe it was only 2 or presumably 3 that he lived through, but
That's a lot of failed peace treaties.
weren't each peace treaties either violated by the Athenian arrogancy, or, I mean, for example, the 30 Years of Peace, can't you say that it was the fear that was instilled by the Athenians and their growing empire that led the Spartans to act on war?
Okay, Mike.
If Donald Trump completely submits to Iran and just destroys America, you're going to worship him as like a peace bringer?
No.
Well, why Alcibiades?
Because Alcibiades wasn't to know who was going to win or lose the war, but at that point he saw it as, oh, someone needs to win this war needs to be done.
As usual, the Honourable Gentleman takes us on the logical equivalent of a helter-skelter.
Okay. Any final questions or observations?
Do we get to the personal insult part of the debate yet?
In your opening speech, what do you mean?
I'd just like to go back to one of your points, Sean, when you spoke about his return in 407. He was greeted as a hero. The people wanted him to be general. What's your opinion on that? The Athenian people greeted him as...
We can talk about my opinions on democracy some other time if you like, but I refer the Honourable Lady to a statement I made earlier. What good is popularity if one will not use it to any good end? Alcibiades did not use his popularity for any good end, and I would say it is the unpopular politicians of the time who were willing to take the unpopular decisions who are truly the ones that deserve our reverence.
I want to follow this up by referencing Aristophanes. As you know, he's the comic playwright. He mocked Alcibiades publicly, which shows many Athenians distrusted him. And there's a line that says, they long for him, they hate him, they cannot do without him. And this suggests that Alcibiades was seen as a charismatic but deeply dangerous by the Athenian people. So in the sense that they were happy to see him when he came back in 407, they, again, 406, they reacted by depriving him of his command, and then he retreated from Athens again. So, I mean, was their support for him limited, or?
Well, the thing is that he didn't retreat from Athens. He was kicked out of Athens because of his defeat at the Battle of Naukos.
And the playwright also made fun of Pericles, who's considered the greatest
I-
Roman leader.
Aristophanes made fun of everybody.
I quote my OCR
Appeal to authority.
textbook, and it says, Alcibiades left, and this is in 406, which I just mentioned, Alcibiades left the fleet in command of his helmsman while he went off to obtain supplies and funds, who foolishly allowed himself to be drawn into the battle of Notia by Lysander, who won a victory. The Athenian people reacted by depriving Alcibiades of his command, and he retreated to a castle he owned on the Hellespont. Therefore, he runs from problems instead of fixing them.
But yeah,
So
What sort of
would you say it's not true that Alcibiades went to a state where he could find personal glory?
I think he went to a state where he could find survival, which I think is very much justified. I think that I'd much rather go to a state.
I just think he helps.
But life is like a stick of
creating
pizza.
things. So
What? He helped Sparta by creating a
battled
baby.
against Sparta.
Oh, yes, and to return to that point, you say it helped the Spartan
It did
king.
help the
But
Spartans.
that baby was struck off the list of succession because he was a bastard. It didn't help him in the slightest.
No, but it helped with Oliganthropia.
One.
One is
Correct.
one.
One.
Also, what was your source for him chopping the tail off his dog? Because all I could find when I did a quick Google search was a Facebook post.
My source is Plutarch, the eminent biographer.
question for you, Fiddler. In the last debate, you argue that Athens was a superior culture to Sparta.
Absolutely.
But wouldn't you say that Alcibiades was the ultimate product of Athens in terms of his brilliance at many things? So I would argue it's contradictory to say Athens was a great culture and to criticise
He's want
Alcibiades.
to expand the empire west.
No, it isn't.
Any development?
I mean, what you might say that you could say that who's
Finley.
Can I answer that?
Yes, Fiddler.
so was Nicias is the point I was trying to get off the tip of my tongue. What I was trying to say is, who's the finest product of Britain, for example. You could say that there was a lot of people that Britain produced who we weren't exactly proud of, like Cecil Rhodes, the finest product of Britain, who is now widely condemned. I mean, it's neither here nor there, but we won't go into Cecil Rhodes either.
Amelia, your
But
point.
yes,
I
it's,
didn't answer it.
opinions change over time about who the national heroes are, Sean, and I would say Nicias and Pericles, they are the true national heroes of Athens, not Alcibiades, the traitor.
But would you not say that at that point one of the biggest glories of Athens was its empire, and one of Alcibiades' main goals for the Sicilian expedition was to expand the empire and conquer greater empires like Carthage and the very young Rome?
Jolly good. Well, I'll see you at the Cecil Rhodes fan club then, because that's exactly the same defence you could use for him.
The Athenian Empire that subdued every other Greek state.
I don't like the Athenian empire.
But you've just referenced it and bigged it up and praised it, so...
In defence of Alcibiades. But he also really likes Sparta.
Less of a
But
logical
didn't-
helter-skelter, more of a logical,
But that goes back to
mousetrap.
Sean's point about he's a product of Athens, but in that case, Pericles, who had reigned for I think 30 plus years, not reigned, sorry, but led.
Presided.
Yes. Athens, about 30 plus years, literally said not to expand any further.
Here,
So therefore, Alcibiades went against the wishes of a close personal family relation. So who is he to say, or who are you to say that if he can't be loyal to, like you mentioned, his wife and to the king of Sparta, and he can't be loyal to the wishes of Pericles, who led Athens in many ways than one, why is he going to be loyal to the Athenians themselves?
Okay, final point. I would say Alcibiades was the greatest product of Athens.
That's crazy.
And the greatest product of Athens is debates, which you have all performed brilliantly today. So I was going to finish there, but Ollie?
Alcibiades is the only strategos autokratos in the history of Athens. So would you not say that the fact he was given that title, which was almost effectively like an emperor, would you not say that the fact that they made him like the biggest ruler title in.
I refer
Emperor's
the honourable
entire
gentleman to my
history.
previous statements on emperors, which he knows far
Would you
too
not
well.
say? Would you not say that?
Hold on a
would
minute.
Why are you you're suggesting that he's emperor-like, but the family that he comes from literally led democracy
Yeah.
Athens gave him the title.
because he forced his way to it.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he
No,
did.
he didn't.
Mine.
So no one held it after him. It's like they almost don't want to repeat a dangerous man with too much power. Like,
Exactly.
The crown wanted him to take the title.
Go on, Pear.
You
You can have the last word.
okay. Finley, you brilliantly outlined in great entertainment and humour how he personally endorsed in debauchery and casual cruelty, but couldn't you say there have been many great leaders who have even been considered heroes who have also partaked in the same activities?
Good point to end on. Let's call
Oh.
it. We'll call it an honourable draw.
Yes, can I say Can I say, greatest product of Athens probably voting rather than debate, so shall we take the vote?
I was going to say let's not vote on this. Let's not.
Oh,
Would you want
must
to have a
be.
vote?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
vote.
Hands up for Alcibiades the hero.
Yes! Hey!
Yes.
Alcibiades the villain.
Come on, all my
Philip,
common
Philip,
sense.
Is that your first win this year?
My first victory!
However, I have the casting vote.
No, you don't. You don't. You absolutely don't. Chairman only casts
I am
casting
like Callimachus at Marathon.
Oh, Beatles.
Okay, well done.
Jolly good.
Brilliant job, Finley.
Jolly good, well done.
Excellent speech.
We've had a good one there to end on.
That was a good going through the gears there.
Do you mind? I mean, you might even not be on it with the camera. You've had jolly good, jolly good. Immortalised.